We were indoors when we heard a noise. My flatmate said, "Can you hear that?" I said, "What?" He said, "Listen." I said, "I am listening." "No," he said, "shut up and then you'll hear it." I stood absolutely still. "I can hear you breathing," I said. "No, not that," he said. "That. That's the point," I said. "Every time you say that, I don't know what the that is that you mean." "There," he said. "Just because you changed the that to there doesn't make it any easier." "That," he said. "Ah, you've switched back," I said. "Listen," he said. "Aeroplane," I said. "That's not an aeroplane," he said. An aeroplane passed overhead. "That's an aeroplane," I said. "I know that's an aeroplane," he said. "I meant the noise." "The aeroplane is making a noise," I said. "I don't mean the aeroplane noise," he said. I listened really hard. "Do you think it's an animal?" I said. "I think it's industrial," he said. "There's no industry left round here," I said. Something with an industrial sound," he said. "Well, animals can make industrial sounds," I said. "The cats make a kind of sound sometimes when they're sleeping." "There," he said. "That's someone's fridge," I said. "No one's fridge is that loud," he said. "Wrong," I said. "People are buying ancient fridges these days. Some of them make that noise." "How ancient?" "I don't know. Fridges from the 1950s. I've seen them," I said. "It's a drill," he said. "Or a sander," I said. "Who would be sanding at this time?" "Or a cement mixer." "Yeah, it does sound like a cement mixer," he said. "No, I meant who would be using a cement mixer at this time," I said. "But it does really sound like a cement mixer," he said. "There goes another aeroplane," I said. Clever cakes and other stories. The Devil Dog. "I'm not afraid of the dark," said Desmond to himself. "I'm not afraid of the dark. Anyway, I ought to be used to it by now." He was Farmer Fiddler's boy on the farm up the valley, and quite often he was kept working late. This night it was lambing, standing with the sheep, trying to make sure that every lamb that was in a mother ewe came out alive. He'd gone on working till he was stiff with cold and nearly asleep on his feet. One moment he thought he saw a lamb with the dog's head, and the next he was sure he felt something strange in his hand, opened his fingers, and there looking at him was what he thought was a big sheep's eye. Now it was time for the walk home in the dark. No harm could come to him on the road, surely. There was the old beech tree. That meant he was halfway home. What if it had been a sheep's eye, he thought. What would have I done then? He shivered. What a cold night. What's that noise? There was a hard, brisk rustling in a tree. It was above his head. He looked up. No, it was nothing. Just the line of the branches, cutting up the sky. He walked on. The cold was biting his face. He was coming to the bit of the road he called the tunnel. Prickly hawthorn trees had grown over the road, and any light from the moon or the stars was kept out by the branches. It was just like a tunnel. Desmond listened to the sound of his feet slow down as he stepped into it. Well into the middle, he felt something on his neck. He rushed his hand up to it. "What's that?" As he spoke, there was a rustle in the ditch beside him, and he stopped dead still in the middle of the road. Oh, the thing on his neck was just a wet leaf, so that was that. But what was that rustle? He looked into the deep dark of the ditch. There was more rustling, and then a whimper. It sounded like a dog in pain. Desmond couldn't see, but he called out to it. Here, boy! And the thing whimpered again. So he took a step nearer. He saw a flash of teeth, and it rustled again. Was it a dog? Or something bigger? It seemed to be caught, helpless. So he stepped up to it. Yes, it was a dog. Thank goodness for that. And it It looked like it had broken its leg, poor thing, and had got weak and cold, trying to get home. Mind you, whose dog was it? Desmond reckoned to know every dog round these parts, and this poor little red and white fellow wasn't one he recognised. Now, lie there a bit more, boy, he said to it, and I'll fetch you some dock leaves from by the stream. He had it in mind to tie the leaves round the bad leg and see if he could walk the dog home with him. There might be a few pence reward in it for him from the person who had lost it. The stream was just a few steps away, and Desmond was soon down to the water and back with the sopping leaves. When he got back, the sight that hit him shook him through and through. The dog had grown huge in the ditch. It was now as big as a bull, and its great red and white side heaved up and down. The whimpering was now more like a roar. The wet leaves froze in his hands, and his eyes seemed to freeze with them. Then he knew he was trapped. He had been tricked by a devil dog. Oh, yes, he had heard about devil dogs from Farmer Fiddler. Devil dogs, Farmer Fiddler had said, they beg you to help them with their lame leg or their raggedy ear. You turn round and they've changed into a poison fish or blood eagles, and you're a goner, finished, dead as old nails. Desmond clenched his teeth together. I ain't gonna be beaten by no devil dog, he said to himself, and he stepped towards the giant beast. Farmer Fiddler had always said that if you ever meet a devil dog, never say a word. Desmond would do just as Farmer Fiddler said, but he reckoned he could do something else. He had beat this old devil dog with kindness, with his hand shaking and his teeth held tight together. He tied the freezing leaves round the devil dog's leg, and not once did he say a thing. When the leg was all tied up, out of the ditch climbed the creature. It towered over Desmond, and he could feel its warm breath on his face. It gave a husky right at him. If I'm finished, now's the time, Desmond thought. At least no one can say I didn't try and help a poor dumb thing in pain. Then what do you know? The beast turned round and trotted off down the road away from Desmond. Well, what do you know, he said to himself. What do you know? And didn't I see it wag its tail just then? But no one will believe me when I tell that story later. But no matter. It's time I got home, and he took a good, strong step towards home. He hurried through the rest of the tunnel and was soon heading down the part of the road he called the Snake. It curved first one way and then the other. Not long to go now, he thought, and he hurried on round the next bend. But as he turned the corner, he came to a sudden standstill and jammed his leg stiff. In the middle of the road stood a huge, dark-coated goat with bright green eyes and terrible hoofs and horns. Desmond stared at it. Something in the back of his mind talked to him. Hadn't he heard once of a boy who was stopped on the road by a giant sheep, and had turned and run screaming, and hadn't this giant sheep galloped right over him, crushing him with its giant hoofs? And didn't the people who told him the story say that the boy's terrible mistake was to turn and run? If he had stood and faced up to the creature, he'd have been all right. So Desmond did just that. He stood and faced up to the horrible goat. But a moment later, it seemed like this was a frightful mistake, for the great goat took one look at Desmond and started to charge towards him, with its head down, stamping the ground and roaring. looming nearer and nearer, its great gleaming horns. "Now is the end," said Desmond. "Now is the end, but don't turn, Desmond boy, don't turn round." And just then, from out of the hedge by the side of the road, leapt a huge red and white dog with a few old leaves tied round its leg. It was the devil dog. It took a great pounce towards the goat and landed on its back. Now the two beasts fought. Sparks flew up from the goat's hoofs on the road, and the dog's teeth flashed. The only light on the whole scene came from the two animals' eyes. They roared "Rawr!" and howled "Rawr!", the goat lunging at the dog with its horns, and the dog trying to sink its teeth into the goat's neck. Jim! Ah! Desmond knew what to do and what not to do. He took neither one step forwards nor one step backwards, but watched the whole fight with his legs still locked stiff. He could hear every breath and every grunt. It was terrifying, but even when it seemed as if the fight would roll right over him, he didn't move. In the end, the goat was getting the worst of it, and it stepped away from the dog. But before Desmond could flicker an eyelid, there was no goat there. In its place flew an owl. It swooped over the dog, flapped silently past Desmond, and away over the hedges and fields. The devil dog stood panting, its great long tongue lolling out of its mouth like a huge lump of liver. It looked at Desmond, and a frightening growl came out of its throat. "Well, it's been a long time coming," thought Desmond, "and now this is it." But deep inside that head of his, Farmer Fiddler's voice told him, "Say nothing. Not a word, not a thank you, not a sorry, not a good evening, not a goodbye. Nothing." He knew that if he did, that huge cave of a mouth would open wide and snap him up as if he were nothing more than a little bird. But the great devil dog stood in his way, and Desmond had to get home. He couldn't stay here all night. If these beasts didn't get him first, he'd freeze to death. So, without so much as an "excuse me" or a "please," Desmond walked first towards and then past the devil dog. It stayed just where it was until Desmond had left it behind him. How he would have loved to have looked behind him, though. How he would have loved to glance over his shoulder to make sure he was safe, or to have one last glimpse of the great beast. But he knew not to. No one looks back at a devil dog and lives to see a new day. On he walked, on, and believe it or not, he didn't see another creature along the rest of the road that night. He never turned back all the way home, and he never spoke of the things that happened that night to anyone at all. Not even me. Now, it would be great if you subscribed. That is, you become a subscriber. Look out for the subscribe button. What happens, you see, is that I make new vids every few months, and then I post them up one a week for a while. So if you subscribe, you get to see the new ones just as they come hot off the press. Eeeew.